An interesting, no one wants to work, conversation. Thoughts? Called a client today to inquire about an invoice I had sent. Turns out, the office person I sent them to was fired for padding her hours. We talked for about 30 minutes about the post-COVID state of things. He's a solid, down-to-earth guy that runs a carpentry business. And business is booming, but he said he is having a hard time with current staff and hiring. I visited his shop about 4 years ago and got the grand tour. It was obvious that he put a lot of trust in his workers. Many of them longtime employees. I got the general feeling it was a well-run business with happy workers. This issue he said he is facing now is that a few longtime trusted people, like over 30 years trusted, were padding hours and wanting to work unconventional hours that fit their schedule and not the business. Also, productivity has dropped. Now I know there could be a number of reasons why that could be, but I genuinely believe is a decent workplace. He made the comment, "Nobody wants to work," and doing some linguistic gymnastics I realized he was not saying he was having a hard time hiring, it was that the employees are behaving differently. Post-COVID, I can see that. People worked from home, had more flexibility, etc. These folks didn't though. It's a blue-collar, hands-on shop. So my questions are: 1. If you are an employee, are you more apathetic at work now? 1. It is because of pay? Environment? Other? 2. Putting in the same effort or no? 2. Employers, what changes have you seen in your staff? 1. For better or for worse? We know wage levels need to be addressed. Some bosses suck. Some employees are skaters. But I am genuinely curious how you think COVID changed attitudes and performance. COVID showed us that the economy is more important than our lives. No one is going above and beyond anymore because we all saw we were expendable. Banks get bailouts. People get inflation. Working hard makes us look like clowns. 1. Yes, I'm completely apathetic at work. 1. Yes, it's 90% pay. The lack of security, advancement, as well as insult to injury. Cost of living means I'm making less money than ever while businesses are richer than ever. 2. Fuck no. 105% at most. Why would I care when employers look at you as a cost to be minimized? COVID showed me just how little they cared about me, so now I care even less about them. It's easy to be broke, why would I work hard at it? I know a big thing that irked me and still does is the flagrant abuse of PPP loans by businesses of all sizes. The fact that employers can get away with massive abuse of the system during the same period employees were struggling kinda drives the point home that the system isn't built for workers. I know in some cases the loans were justified, but something 75% of distributed loans were unjustified, and I don't see much recourse, which is the demoralizing norm now. What is it all for? Hard to be motivated about a society that exists solely to make 100 or so billionaires richer, and where no matter how hard you work, there is no real way to get ahead. COVID showed us how little we are worth. Precisely nothing, that is. The common people are fodder for the mill that makes the rich richer. You are not rewarded for your work. And your time is the most valuable resource you have, and people need to realize that. I was laid off immediately after moving 1,300 miles for work and had to take a job paying half what I made previously. Skilled labor at $13 per hour while I watched the owner drive 7 cars that all cost more than I made in a year. But it was a meritocracy and I busted my ass anyway. After making it into management, it was like pulling teeth telling him he needs to financially incentivize performance. You can't just pat people on the back anymore and expect them to keep coming in every day. Bigger, more professional shops will pay these kids double and give them health insurance. Eventually I complained about a 50C raise and was told my position as manager wasn't valued more than that. When I went back to my union job, the company had restructured their performance bonus metrics so the company can spend all of their cash on hand on acquisitions in order to avoid paying workers bonuses. The CEO is making $10 mil in total compensation. There's more directors making more in a year than I'll see in 10. New hires are coming in at wages we spent 6 years building up to with no bumps, incentives for current employees. COVID made it very clear to me that companies will exploit labor at any opportunity. I'm here to do as little work as I can tolerate. My job isn't challenging. The work is uninspiring. I'm as high as I can go in my designation and I only get $1 per year in raises without moving to a salary position. Why should I try? I get nothing for trying. I get paid to show up and anything beyond that is just to keep me sane. I think it's pretty simple. Employers found that during the pandemic they could work with skeleton crews and make even more money. So they've permanently trimmed down staff while the media pushes this "no one wants to work anymore" narrative so everyone can once again conveniently blame the poor. I've had serious looks of realization when I've explained this to customers. People will really just eat the slop, won't they? For me it was watching society alter so rapidly during the first several months of COVID lockdown and the removal of social, economic norms. There was the clear understanding that the world that was would no longer exist. Layoffs across the majority of industry dismissed the facade that employment was really anything beyond a transactional agreement. Fast forward a few years and capitalism has a bad PR problem. Rightfully earned work provides a paycheck, not a reason for living. So, in conclusion, why doesn't you friend make it a partially labor-owned business? Make the job something larger than a 9-to-5. As an employee and a Gen Xer, I've always been apathetic about work. But a big part of it is the pay. I know for an absolute fact that I generated nearly $10 million worth of revenue for the company my first year there. And while I'm paid decently, I know I'll never be able to afford a house or a retirement without winning the lottery. And none of this is anything I can change. Tons of corporations driving up the cost of housing and the government deciding to jack up interest rates to counter inflation are both way out of my control. If I'm expected to exist with the bare minimum, why shouldn't I do the bare minimum? You've argued here that it's not about money. If that's the case, why were folks committing time fraud? Also, if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's capitalism has completely decimated the middle class as it once was during F. Doctor's time. The new middle class is single-digit millionaires. That's not most Americans today. If we are all disposable and no one wants to work anymore, then consensus is that we just won't. What's the point? To make the boss richer? We won't get ahead. We will likely work into what little retirement we will be able to have and drop dead at work. Might as well live on the edge. People realized that the essential workers are the ones paid the least, the capitalists. That society actually doesn't need to function, make all the money by adding nothing to the economy themselves. The greedy corporations are driving inflation by profiteering, and we as working people are suffering at the hands of the capitalists more so than ever. This has driven me to fight back more than ever. I have become very politically active, taken a job that pays less but has a political impact and fights the big corporations. I'm a teacher, and I went from being in a profession that was already generally looked down on in society to a hero, right back to a villain in the span of about 6 months. The entire process of, we need to figure out how to make the school year work without in-person classes was draining. There was no protocol for this. We had to work with the assumption that students had the resources to do their part, parents that made sure they did their part. We joke that part of our job is to teach kids who don't want to learn math how to do math. Suddenly, if there's a way to turn off your Wi-Fi and claim connectivity problems, people will do that. Policies that focused more on making sure we could open our classrooms so parents could go back to work before focusing on how to keep us safe. The expectation to teach in person and online at the same time. And severe learning loses from the year before. Basically because it became even more noticeable that the systems we have in our state never really worked. All that to say, in a lot of districts it didn't even matter in the end if the child was passing before the shutdown, or even sometimes not. They were passed along anyway. The government made things safer for a while. My hometown made it on the news for bullying students and teachers who tried to protect themselves with masks. And things went back to normal, while teachers had to watch the losses quadruple. Personally, my mom, who is a hospice nurse, ended up getting long COVID. Her kidneys started failing and her lungs don't work like they used to. I had to start chemo-surgical treatments back in the middle of this. And had to do it completely alone where I was 22 and used to having a support person with me. Families were tearing apart because of political discourse in the United States. Things just didn't feel right between 20,202,022 and I feel like as a society we never had the chance to burn back in after burning out. My school district abandoned their plan to fix learning loss for this school year and is now forcing an awful curriculum on the teachers and students. Observations have started back with the same expectations as always, completely ignoring that half of my second graders never learned to read. And when met with actual questions about how to fix things, we are told things like, "Remember why you wanted to do this." On top of that, I got pregnant this school year and was met with violence in the classroom. Parents whose only concern was when I was going on leave. And a blood pressure problem I never had before because I didn't have the knowledge or resources to problem solve for behaviors, academics I had to face. It's not that I don't like my job deep down, or that I don't want to do my job. It's that I never had the chance to recover from what my job became during the shutdown, and the apathetic nature of students. Change in discourse from parents. Why are you failing my kid? Instead of what can we do to make sure my kid understands the content better? Lack of support from admin. Inflation that my salary didn't keep up with. Sub-shortages that prevent me from getting proper prenatal care. Crowded classes. Low salary. School violence. Getting texts from my husband, a middle school teacher, about his school going on code red and it not being a drill, just in case things don't turn out okay. I love you and our kids. And higher expectations than ever. I'm just tired. I want to work at home and be a mom until it's truly safe to go back to work. But I don't think it will be until policy and change becomes more important than money. I love teaching. I love the students, even when it feels like they don't love me. And I love watching the light bulbs go off when something clicks. But there comes a point when you have to wonder if it was worth it every day. It boils down to one thing. Employers aren't raising wages in step with inflation. Where I'm from, there are job offers absolutely everywhere. We're not grateful for our jobs anymore, nor our bosses. The business I work for got hit hard by COVID. We felt the despair when sales went down. We were scared for our jobs. We worked harder when they had to cut staff to stay afloat. All along the way, the only thing we got were thanks, mostly sent by emails. Still today, when we surpass the sales objectives, at best we will receive an email letting us know how incredible we are. I used to respect my bosses. They work very hard. I don't anymore. I know they only care about their business. I did the whole quiet quitting before it was a thing. Back in 2018, my spouse and I experienced a miscarriage and it broke us emotionally. We reassessed our lives and we both quit our jobs, which we hated. I worked a retail client-facing job at the time and I hated it. We both found better jobs with better schedules and pay. Then COVID hit and I was fired from my new job. I was never able to get a new job because of lockdowns and people losing jobs. So I decided to stay at home, homeschool my youngest and take care of the house. Luckily, my spouse is able to maintain our lifestyle. My spouse works from home, so it's a much better way to live. I feel for everyone who works retail, blue-collar and/or client-facing jobs. What a weird way to say, the best places to work are still abusive and not pleasant situations that steal the product of your labor after you damaged yourself making it, and distributes it to the owning class. It's about time someone snapped that well-meaning but still an asshole manager out of his comfortable stupor. 1. Yes. More apathetic. 1. Pay has not kept up with cost of living. I have an advanced degree, professional license, and make 6 figures. My wife works as well, and still we are struggling to afford a house and pay ridiculous rent. Environment. My employer didn't want to hire qualified staff and decided to send things offshore. So now instead of hanging out with a cool team of like-minded people, I'm on a video call with people 12 time zones away, who have no idea what I'm talking about, nor do they care. Other COVID reminded that jobs can be deemed non-essential, and then you just don't need to do them. And also you can just die one day and your family won't even see your funeral too. No. The more effort I put in, the more work is loaded on me. COVID was traumatizing for me and I'm sure many others would agree. I lost my mom to COVID. I got to experience firsthand what the disease can do to a person. And, again because of COVID, I had to do this extremely isolated from most of the world. I am a fundamentally different person because of the pandemic, what it took from me, and how I was expected to just act normally through it. I worked a desk job at a credit union through the bulk of the pandemic and never once was able to transition to WFH. My company allowed its executives and a handful of important people to keep themselves safe, but the rest of us still had to clock 40 hours in the office. I'm in a different job now, and have access to remote work when needed, but management is still taking that away incrementally. It's like our capitalist society took this moment to literally torture me and millions of others. We were isolated from each other, got to watch from afar loved ones die a horrible death, and then expected to still produce, consume at an ever-increasing pace. So yes, in regards to work, I care a lot less now. I love my job and I try to do honest work for the hours I'm in it. But I will never go the extra mile and kill myself for a job ever again. The pandemic forced capitalists to show their true face, and I'm not going to go back to thinking that this economy structure, and my job by extension, will ever have my personal health and interests in mind. I used to come to work sick, drive through snowstorms, work through breaks and lunches, and sacrifice. Never again. I will work honestly for the hours I'm contracted for. I still care, but to some, that will never be enough.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicuricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.